Welcome into another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Thursday, July 11th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to start talking a little bit about the Big 12 Media Days. There was a ton to unpack from the last couple of days in Las Vegas, and we're going to try to get through all of it today. Maybe some stuff trails into tomorrow, but we'll figure that out when we get there. Then we'll get into the Ohio State Buckeyes, a ton going into this season, but I want to ask a question that I think should be asked quite some time ago, but is it really national championship or bust for the Ohio State Buckeyes? Do they need a championship, or is that just something that is very much in the goals for this team this season? We'll break down what I think they have to do and why I think it's not necessarily a full national title run. Then we'll get into the most impactful freshman. We'll continue that. Did the SEC yesterday. We'll get into the Big Ten and go through all the conference contenders and give you the guy that I just think is the biggest coming in his first year. And then we'll get into a Hot Take Thursday where I'll break down why I think being a blue blood just doesn't really mean all that much. It's a very, very cool title, but that's about it. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all, we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here. Excuse me, I apologize. You can use the tip and donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcspodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to kind of have a fun, interactive experience here, and that's always good for the both of us. So definitely use that if you would like. Again, that's gsmcspodcast.net. But let's jump right in because there is so much to cover from the Big 12 Media Days the last couple of days. Frankly, I thought this was going to be something of a more tame couple of days in terms of the media days that are coming up. I didn't think there was going to be any crazy news that came out. Well, there were about 5 different things that were crazy that came out of this. So I want to start breaking this down, and we'll get to what a lot of you, I'm sure, are waiting for, which is Mike Gundy a little bit later on. But I want to start with Brett Yormark, and I want to start with some of his comments that he made throughout this conference that they had. He is obviously the commissioner of the Big 12, was hired a couple of years ago, right in the middle of the Texas OU transition to the SEC, handled that very beautifully, I thought. I think it was in the best interest of the conference and of everyone in that conference to get them out pretty much as quickly as possible, and he went out of his way to make that happen. And now he's going on the offensive. That was the one thing that stood out more than anything else from the last couple of days, and there were plenty of things that stood out, but this guy is out for blood. That's really the best way that I can put it. This guy absolutely wants the Big 12 to be, as he put it, the number one conference in the country. He said he is not going to stop until that happens. Frankly, they're a far cry from that being the case, so I hope he's ready to just run for quite some time. But regardless, there is some news around that definitely does lean in that direction for the Big 12 to be a powerhouse moving forward, and we'll get into that in details tomorrow. But it sounds like Florida State and Clemson might just be in talks with the Big 12, but we'll jump into that obviously a little bit deeper tomorrow. But this guy is insatiable. That's the best way to describe him. When you bring in a guy from the TV world into the college sports world, he's going to know what everything's about. He's going to know how to handle his business, how to go about these negotiations, and more than anything else, he's going to be a little bit ruthless. He's going to go after some people, and he's going to be aggressive in the way that he goes about managing this conference. And he's done a great job thus far, that's for sure. He's done a fantastic job just getting them through this pretty crazy time and backfilling with some really good brands in Utah and Arizona and Colorado, obviously, have been huge for this program. But there's going to be a lot of big things that have to happen in the next couple of years, months, whatever it is. But it seems like everything is on the table for this conference, at least in terms of making money, whether that's sponsorships on the fields for the teams or on the for the conference. That's something we've talked about a little bit. I fully expect that to happen pretty much across the country. I believe Texas Tech actually already unveiled a couple of logos they're going to have on their field. So definitely something that I expect to happen much more consistently throughout that conference, and they're looking very much towards private equity, which would obviously help them with some of the realignment stuff. So this guy is going to be one of the most important people in the sport going forward, and he definitely has the power to make some real noise. But let's get into what pretty much everyone wants to talk about when they talk about the Big 12 Media Days right now, and it's that guy right there. Mike Gundy went to the Big 12 Media Days with a lot on his shoulders. There's no two ways about that. When you have your star player go through something like Ollie Gordon did with the DUI arrest, and a lot of things just not necessarily going super great in the PR world of your organization, you'd love for your head coach to handle it just a little bit better. And I'll give a little bit of context here if anyone did not see it. First, I'll start with one of the comments he made a little bit earlier in the day when talking about Ollie Gordon and if he was going to play to start the season. He said yes. He said that's not a question. He will be in those games to start the season. That's not up for debate, which frankly, I tend to agree with him on that. I could see an argument that he should be suspended for 1 or 2 games, but at the end of the day, I think if they handle it internally and if Ollie Gordon, moves forward and understands the mistake he made, which it really seems like he did, he handled this beautifully throughout the last couple of days. But whatever punishment that he feels is right, I'm more than fine with that. He did double down and say if there's any punishment, it'll be him running the ball 50 times in the first game. Now, this is a relatively benign comment. I'm not necessarily going to tear apart Mike Gundy for this comment because I think he was just, making a little joke or just, it basically just, it's relatively benign. But the reality is, it's not necessarily the greatest response. It's one of those that I don't think he was trying to, make light of the situation. I don't think he was trying to make a joke, but I do think he didn't answer that question necessarily the way that you would love him to if you're the PR or media director over there at Oklahoma State. And then he went a little bit further later on in the day because he was asked a question later in the day just asking about how he went about making that decision, how he went about, is Ollie Gordon going to play? How much is he going to play? How's that all going to work out? And he said some words that were not too great. He said for a number of different things. He talked about being over the legal limit. Ollie Gordon came in at a 0.1. The legal limit, obviously, a 0.08. So not too far over the legal limit. And he went with that a little bit. After looking up that metric, he claimed it could be 2 or 3 beers. Gundy said he could have easily done that 1,000 times and just not gotten caught. That's not a great thing to say. It's not. I want to get out in front of this because I know a lot of people are saying this. He was not justifying what Ollie Gordon did. I understand that was not a good comment to make, and the PR team and the media training team was none too happy at him for sure. But at the end of the day, I promise you, he was not trying to justify what he did. He was trying to justify the decision that he made around Ollie Gordon. That being said, this is just outright a bad answer. There's no two ways about that. I'm not a genius. I've never been in his shoes. I'm not trying to throw stones, but I do know when to say he made a mistake, we're moving forward, and we'll punish him internally, and that's about it. I know when those answers need to be brought out, and that is one of those situations. So overall, just not necessarily the best way to go about business for Mike Gundy. He was also asked who's the face of the league now, and he said, it's got to be me, right? So Mike Gundy is a pretty wild dude. He's had some comments in the past that have been very, very interesting. This one might just take the cake. But at the end of the day, Ollie Gordon handled this absolutely beautifully. I think he was incredibly smart and incredibly forthright about the decision that he made and the mistake that he made, and was really just a consummate professional throughout this entire thing. So it's a little wild that the young kid is handling this a little bit better than the adult in the room, but at the end of the day, I don't think Mike Gundy meant any harm. I don't think he was trying to excuse his Ollie Gordon's behavior by any means. I just think he misspoke and create a little bit of a nightmare for the PR team over there at Oklahoma State. But at the end of the day, it was a very, very interesting quote to see come across your page, but I'm not necessarily going to tear him apart for that. As long as he handles this correctly in-house, I got no problem. But we'll see if Ollie Gordon gets 50 carries in the first game, because That would be quite the sight. But let's continue on here and talk about Kyle Whittingham and the Utah Utes. And one of the big things that broke out was obviously about Cam Rising, coming back from that year-long injury and ton riding on this year. And he spoke a little bit about this year, but the big news that came out was he will not be back for 2025 and an 8th year in college football. He has decided that 7 years is plenty long to be in college football, and although I am a full believer of play football as long as you can because not everyone gets this opportunity, I think Cam Rising is in a position where if he has the year that I expect him to have, he can be a draft pick, probably a later round draft pick, but still a draft pick and find his way into the NFL. So I think he's likely gone at the end of the season. And then Kyle Whittingham is the other big question mark. The future of him is very, very interesting, and he gave about as little of an answer as we could possibly get while getting some type of context about his future. They were asking him about a future matchup that was scheduled for 2027, I believe against Cal. I could be wrong about that, but I want to say it was Cal. And he did give a hint just saying, I will likely not be in this position by the time that game happens. So by 2027, he's gone. That's the best that I can give you as of this moment. I tend to believe that he will be gone at the end of the season just because of the recruiting implications of making Morgan Scalley the head coach in waiting. But who knows? Maybe he sticks around for a little bit longer and they just kind of ride this wave. But at the end of the day, I tend to believe this is it. So enjoy this guy while you got him because this is one of the best head coaches in all of college football. But let's move on to the guy that is the show. Deion Sanders always is making waves with a ton of the things that he says, and some of them are really, really benign, and people make a big deal out of them. Some of them are really just fun to unpack. And he had a couple that were very, very interesting, but I do want to start with a very interesting theme that I saw throughout this thing when other coaches were asked about Deion, because that's a question that they're going to get from now until eternity while they are in the Big 12. But everyone was very, very complimentary of what he's doing. And I know there's this idea that people behind closed doors absolutely hate Deion and they hate the way that he's going about business. And I'm not arguing that there are some coaches even in that conference that aren't too gung-ho on Deion being in the conference, but they all believe that he's doing a really good thing for college football, and I don't really think that can be argued at this point. It can be argued, whether his teams are going to be fantastic moving forward. It can be argued whether he's going to be there at Colorado moving forward, but what he's done at Colorado has been just outright magical. He's built an entire college football entity out there in about 2 years now that is one of the biggest, one of the most followed in the country. And while, the wins don't necessarily pack up the same as some of the other big guys, it's still a huge deal. There's no two ways about that. So I thought that was the biggest thing. Also a very fun fact, Joey McGuire, the head coach over at Texas Tech, coached Deion Jr. When he was in high school. So a very weird connection between those two, but that was pretty cool. He also said Travis Hunter is the best wide receiver and cornerback in the country. I don't think he's either of those things. Frankly, I don't think I'd put him in the top 5 of either of those things. That's not to say he's not one of the best football players in the country. It's just to say if you're going to play 130 snaps, it makes it a little bit harder to be the top 5 in both of those positions. But still an outrageous player and absolutely love the confidence from Deion. He obviously did drop a little bit about the NFL draft, said Shedeur and Travis could go 1 and 2 overall. I don't expect that to happen, but again, that's the confidence that comes with this team. And then finally, the big one that made noise was Shedeur Sanders made a comment that was Quinn Ewers-esque. He decided to say, we are everyone's Super Bowl when asked about the intensity going into this season. And I'll say the same thing I said about Quinn Ewers. I absolutely love this energy. I don't necessarily think it's true from a football perspective, but when you look at, the energy that those teams are going to be coming in with, they're going to want to beat that team really, really badly because of all the hype, because of all the talk, because of who these guys are. They want to beat them really badly. So it's not necessarily the craziest statement in the world, but it is the right mentality to have. If you're going into this season, especially with all of the eyes on you, you need to go in with that intensity. There's no two ways about it. And then finally, just a little thing here. Chris Kleiman broke down some very, very interesting things around Avery Johnson and Matt Wells, the new offensive coordinator over there. he says they're gelling just like no one else. It looks beautiful in practice, apparently. And if that's the case, it's a very scary proposition for the rest of the Big 12, because if Avery Johnson is comfortable in this offense year round, they're your Big 12 champion. I feel pretty confident in that. So he also said he expects a huge year from DJ Giddens, the really talented running back. So a ton to break down from this Big 12 media days. And we didn't even get to the biggest thing, which is around realignment, which we will totally dive into tomorrow. I promise you that. But it could be that Florida State and Clemson might be in these conferences in a couple of years here, but we'll break that down when it comes time. But let's take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. We're going to ask the question that everyone's been asking: is it really title or bust for the Buckeyes this upcoming season? And if it's not, what is it? What is the moniker that they have to reach, or this season was an outright failure? So I'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.